If you're listening to this while folding laundry, washing dishes, or just sitting in that quiet moment between chores, then maybe you felt it too. That slow ache. The moment you realize you're not angry, you're just invisible. Not because you did something wrong, but because you've been there so long, no one sees you anymore. That's what happened to me. My name is Helen. I'm 69 years old. I live in Savannah, Georgia, and I gave up everything to raise a daughter who now looks at me like I'm a burden with a bank account. People think motherhood ends when your kid turns 18, that they grow up, say thank you, and live their lives. But real mothers know that the giving doesn't stop. It stretches silently, from diapers to diplomas to rent checks and phone calls at midnight. I raised Jasmine alone. My husband passed when she was 9. He had a heart attack in the garden right next to the old oak tree. One minute he was pulling weeds, the next minute he was gone. And just like that, I was a widow with a 3rd grader and a mortgage. I was a school teacher for 37 years, 3rd grade. The in-between age, where they're still sweet but smart enough to know how to test you. Every child I taught got a piece of me. But Jasmine, she got everything. I used to make lunches with little handwritten notes, braid her hair even when my arthritis made it hard to grip the comb, and sew her Halloween costumes from scratch. When her friends had iPhones, I gave up my car repairs to get her one. When she applied to art school in New York, I dipped into our emergency fund so she wouldn't have to take out loans. She never asked twice. She didn't have to. I said yes before she finished the sentence. People told me I was spoiling her. I smiled and said, "She's all I've got." And I meant it. Jasmine had a bright spark in her. Always did. She was the kind of kid who colored outside the lines, not by accident, but on purpose. And I thought, if I just poured enough love into her, she'd never go cold. But warmth doesn't guarantee return. I know that now. When Jasmine got her first big photography job, I cried. I printed out the email offer and taped it to the fridge like a kindergartner's report card. When she launched her studio, I helped repaint the space, brought sandwiches to her crew, and even cleaned bathrooms when her assistant quit. She laughed it off, called me her studio mom. I wore the name like a badge, but things changed slowly after her 3rd failed client project. Equipment debt piled up. Rent for the space doubled. Jasmine started showing up at my door more often, sometimes smiling, sometimes tight-lipped. "Just for a few weeks, Mom," she'd say. Then weeks turned into months. I gave her the guest room, made casseroles, folded her laundry when she was out late trying to find new gigs. Then one night, I overheard her on the phone in the hallway. "No, I haven't told her yet. She's not going to say no. She never does." That line hit me in the chest harder than I expected. She's not going to say no. I went back into my room, sat down on the edge of my bed, and stared at the family photo on my dresser. Jasmine was 5 in the picture, arms wrapped around my neck like she thought I was her whole world. And in that moment, I wondered, did I raise someone kind? Or just someone who knew how to use kindness against me? When the bills came for her studio shutdown, she said she just needed time. I gave her space. When her car got repossessed, she said it was temporary. I handed her my keys. When I noticed odd mail arriving, bank letters, credit card offers in my name, I asked once. She smiled too fast and said, "Oh, must be spam. Just toss it." I wanted to believe her. I always wanted to believe her, because the truth was too painful to hold. In March, she brought home 2 thick folders and asked me to sign a few forms to simplify the taxes. She had already highlighted where I needed to sign. "It's just bank stuff, Mom. Nothing serious," she said. I hesitated. She rolled her eyes. "Do you trust me or not?" And just like that, I picked up the pen. Because I did. Or I wanted to. That was the moment I gave her the last key. Not to my money, but to my peace. Weeks passed. Then one Sunday morning, she burst into the kitchen like a gust of wind. "Mom," she said, "I need you to co-sign something. Just a formality. It's for a loan, but it'll help me stabilize everything." I looked at her, still holding my coffee. I said, "What happens if it doesn't work out again?" She snapped, "Then at least one of us tried something instead of sitting around crocheting all day." I didn't say anything, but inside something cracked. That night, I couldn't sleep. I opened the closet where I kept the old financial files. I pulled every folder out, and when I compared the account balances to what I remembered, it didn't match. I saw transactions I never made, a new business listed with the state, under my name, a virtual address in Atlanta I'd never been to. My heart pounded like it wanted out of my chest. I made tea and sat in the dark until sunrise. Jasmine came downstairs, casual, scrolling her phone. "You look tired, Mom." "I am," I said. "Tell me the truth. Did you open accounts in my name?" She froze for a breath, then smiled, like nothing. "Mom, come on, don't be paranoid. You're always forgetting things lately." And just like that, she planted the first seed, doubt in my own mind. That morning, I called my old friend Naomi. We'd taught together decades ago, and she'd gone into finance after retirement. I told her something felt off. She said, "Helen, send me copies today." I did. The next day, she called back. "You need to come see me in person, now." I took a taxi. My hands were trembling the whole ride. When I got there, she looked me straight in the eye and said, "Helen, she's not just borrowing money. She's preparing to take everything, and she's trying to prove you're not mentally fit to stop her." That's when I stopped being a mother trying to help, and I started being a woman trying to survive. Because sometimes a revenge story doesn't start with fury. It starts with silence, with one person finally realizing, I don't have to let them do this to me again. When I walked into Naomi's office that morning, I expected numbers, bank statements, maybe forged signatures. I didn't expect what she slid across the table, a copy of a medical intake form with my name on it. Diagnosis, early cognitive decline, care recommendation, monitored living facility. And the signature at the bottom? Mine. Except it wasn't. Naomi looked at me gently. "Helen, this wasn't just about money. She's setting the groundwork to take legal control of your life. She's preparing for guardianship." I laughed, but it was the kind of laugh that doesn't reach your chest. "Jasmine thinks I'm losing my mind now?" "No," Naomi said, her tone sharp. "She wants everyone else to think you are." I stared at the paper, my name printed across the top in neat block letters. I couldn't breathe for a moment. I thought of every time Jasmine told me I'd misplaced something, said I was confused about bills, rolled her eyes when I repeated a question. It wasn't just disrespect, it was a narrative. "She's been laying this track for a while, hasn't she?" I asked. Naomi nodded. "And the moment she gets a judge to sign off, your assets, your home, your decisions, gone. It's a strange feeling when your own child starts planning a future without you in it. Not emotionally, legally." I sat there in that stiff office chair, surrounded by laminated diplomas and a dusty ficus, and I realized something that hurt more than anything Jasmine had ever said. She wasn't waiting for me to get old. She was building a case to erase me while I was still here. That night, Jasmine made lasagna. She never cooked unless she wanted something. The house smelled like garlic and manipulation. I watched her move around my kitchen like she owned the place. She plated dinner like it was a peace offering. "I thought you liked when I made this," she said sweetly. I forced a smile. "You used to put fresh basil on top." She blinked, then shrugged. "Oh, guess I forgot." There it was again, tiny chips at memory, subtle, rehearsed, strategic. We ate mostly in silence. She scrolled her phone. I stared at my plate. I didn't taste a thing. After dinner, she leaned against the counter. "I talked to a facility in Macon," she said casually, like she was mentioning a hair salon. "They have amazing programs, art therapy, music, you'd love it." My fork slipped from my hand and hit the tile with a clang. I didn't bend down to get it. I just looked up at her. "A facility?" I asked, my voice colder than I expected. She waved her hand, too fast. "It's not like that. It's independent living with support. You've been forgetting a lot lately, Mom. Don't you want to feel safe?" I held her gaze for a long moment. "I feel safe here, in my own home, surrounded by my own things. You're the one who keeps saying I'm not well." Jasmine sighed, exasperated. It's not an attack, it's a plan. Yes, it was. A plan. The kind that starts with gaslighting and ends with court orders. She wanted to pack me up, move me out, and take over the one place in this world I still felt like myself. And worse, she wanted me to say thank you for it. If you're listening to this and you've ever had someone talk to you like your memories don't matter anymore, like your history is inconvenient, I want you to know you're not alone. Leave me a comment and tell me, have you ever felt like someone tried to make you disappear while smiling to your face? That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at the edge of my bed, lights off, tea cold on the nightstand. I held that forged medical form in my lap like it might burn through the blanket. I remembered the little girl who used to climb into bed with me during thunderstorms. And then I thought of the woman who stood in my kitchen that night, talking about programs in Macon, like I was a burden to be filed away. It didn't hurt because she said it. It hurt because she believed it. The next morning, Naomi called. I did some digging, she said. She contacted an elder law attorney last month. She's preparing to file for emergency guardianship if she can get a doctor's note. Which doctor? One from the clinic she listed on that fake form. But get this, he's her friend's husband. Of course. Naomi's voice dropped. You need to move, quietly, before she files anything. I looked around my living room, the picture frames, the worn armchair, the vase with fake tulips. This was my life, my history. And suddenly I was the trespasser in it. That afternoon, Jasmine came home with 2 bags of groceries. Got your favorites, she chirped. Vanilla yogurt, green grapes, chamomile tea. She unpacked like a daughter who cared, but every item she placed in the fridge felt like a goodbye gift. I stood by the hallway watching her, and for the first time, I saw it clearly. She wasn't waiting for me to die. She was clearing the space ahead of time. You've always taken care of me, she said, not looking up. Let me take care of you now. But she wasn't caring for me. She was containing me. Later that night, I typed a list into my phone. Contacts, account numbers, safe deposit box info, Naomi's backup address. I labeled the note contingency. I wasn't planning an escape. I was reclaiming my life before someone else locked it behind a legal door. The next morning, I called a senior co-op Naomi recommended, Cedar Pines. Quiet, gated, discreet, no forwarding address needed. I said yes to the deposit, said yes to the room, said yes to myself. The last thing I packed was the old photo of me and Jasmine on her 5th birthday. She's blowing out candles, and I'm holding her shoulders gently, like I'm trying to anchor her in place. I looked at that photo and whispered, I miss her too. Then I wrapped it in a towel and placed it at the bottom of my suitcase, because I wasn't taking Jasmine with me, but I was taking the truth. And the truth was this. She didn't just betray me. She tried to erase me. But I would disappear on my terms, and I'd take every piece of myself back before she could sell it for a profit. Packing up your life is quieter than you'd think. No drama, no tears, just Ziploc bags, folded cardigans, and a handwritten list of things you never thought you'd have to hide from your own daughter. I left before sunrise. Jasmine was still asleep, curled up in the guest room with her weighted blanket and the same entitlement she carried since the first time she slammed a door in high school. I didn't leave a note, just silence, the kind that speaks louder than anything I could have written. Naomi picked me up in her old Corolla. She didn't ask questions, just handed me a thermos of coffee and drove with the windows cracked, letting the cold Georgia air wrap around us. The ride to Augusta felt like shedding a second skin. Every mile between me and my old house loosened something in my chest I hadn't realized was clenched. When we pulled up to Cedar Pines, a simple single-story building with faded white shutters and flower boxes under each window, I didn't feel relief. I felt shame, like I had failed at something I was supposed to be good at, like motherhood came with a finish line I'd never reached. Inside, the woman at the desk handed me a welcome packet, a key, and a room number. Naomi walked with me down the hall, past soft yellow walls and quiet chatter from the common area. My room was small, a bed, a kitchenette, a tiny window facing a half-dead garden. It wasn't much, but it was mine. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in the dark with a cup of peppermint tea and stared at the wall, listening to the faint hum of an old refrigerator. I thought about everything I'd left behind: my china set, my wedding ring in the sock drawer, the box of old photos Jasmine always said she'd scan one day. And then I thought about what I hadn't taken and realized I'd left more than just things. I'd left the last scraps of who I used to be in that house. In the morning, I turned on my phone. Naomi had transferred my number to a new device, and the messages started rolling in. Voicemail 1. Mom, where are you? I made you breakfast. Voicemail 2. Okay, this isn't funny. You're acting unstable again. Voicemail 3. You've scared Tyler. He thinks something happened to you. Voicemail 4. I'm calling the police if I don't hear from you in an hour. By voicemail 5, I turned off the phone. The truth was, I wasn't scared. I wasn't even angry. I was tired. Tired of being treated like I had to earn the right to exist in my own life. That afternoon, Naomi arrived with a clipboard and a folder labeled Recovery Plan. She laid it on the table like a doctor delivering test results. We'll start with freezing the accounts, she said. Then we'll set up a living trust. No one, not even your daughter, can touch anything without going through me. I nodded, my throat tight. And Helen, she said gently, we're going to file a report. Financial elder abuse, fraud, attempted guardianship under false claims. I didn't respond, just stared at my tea, now cold and bitter. Naomi leaned forward. You didn't do anything wrong. But that's the thing no one tells you. When your child turns against you, not in anger, but in calculation, it doesn't just hurt. It rewrites the entire story you thought you lived. Later that week, a padded envelope arrived at Cedar Pines. No return address, but I knew the handwriting. Jasmine. Inside was a note, short and sweet. Mom, I'm sorry if I pushed too hard. I was just scared. We both want what's best for you. Can we please talk? Love, Jasmine. Tucked behind it was a brochure for a progressive memory care center with a pink post-it that read, They have music therapy. You always loved piano. I didn't cry. I just stared at the words, feeling them bounce off me like pebbles on a stone. It wasn't a daughter reaching out. It was a sales pitch, a polite little shove wrapped in pastel paper. I slid the envelope into Naomi's file box without a word. At Cedar Pines, no one asked too many questions. Margaret in 3B lent me a plant for my windowsill. Mr. Donovan down the hall offered me extra sugar packets from the dining room. No pity, no prying, just quiet kindness, the kind I hadn't felt in years. Still, there were moments when the grief came in sudden waves. Like the first morning I reached for the landline to call Jasmine about a recipe, then stopped mid-dial. Or when I caught myself wondering what she'd do for Mother's Day this year, then remembered. I wasn't invited anymore. I wasn't mother. I was obstacle. One night, I sat outside on the courtyard bench, wrapped in a borrowed shawl, and watched the wind move through the trees. I thought about the last time Jasmine hugged me. I couldn't even remember it. Had it been a real hug? Or one of those quick, one-armed pats she gave out like receipts? The question haunted me. Because for all the paperwork Naomi could file, for all the bank accounts we could secure, there was no form for this, no legal protection against the loss of someone who once called you mommy and meant it. And maybe that's the part no one sees, the part we don't talk about, that even when you take your life back, there's still a hole where the love used to live, a soft, sore place that aches when it rains or when the house is too quiet. That's the unseen loss, not the money, not the home, but the version of yourself who believed they'd never have to protect their heart from their own child. That night, I tucked myself into bed, slowly, every joint reminding me that time moves in only one direction. I turned off the light, laid there, in the dark, and whispered to no one in particular, I gave you everything. And in the silence that followed, I finally admitted to myself, that wasn't a gift. That was a target. The first real moment of stillness came on a Tuesday morning. I was sitting in the little common room at Cedar Pines, watching a squirrel paw at the feeder just outside the window. Margaret from 3B had left a plate of shortbread cookies on the table, and the air smelled like lemon polish and old upholstery. It wasn't special. It wasn't grand. But for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I had to brace myself for anything. I took a sip of tea. Just tea. Not a trap. Not a, we need to talk. Just hot water, a tea bag, and peace. It hit me like a quiet wave. I didn't need Jasmine's permission to feel okay. I didn't need her to apologize or come running with tears in her eyes. I didn't need her to change. I just needed her not to be holding the pen anymore in the story of my life. Naomi arrived that afternoon with a folder tucked under her arm and that same calm, capable energy she always carried. She looked like she'd just stepped off a courtroom floor, sharp blazer, hair pinned back, clipboard in hand. "Today, we start building walls," she said, placing the folder on the kitchen table. "Good legal ones, the kind she can't crawl over." I nodded and pulled my chair closer. We started with the living trust. My home, my accounts, everything I still had, transferred under a protected entity that Jasmine couldn't touch. Then came the freeze orders on all open bank lines. The forensic report Naomi had commissioned showed clear signs of digital manipulation. Email reroutes, electronic signature forgeries, IP addresses tied back to Jasmine's studio computer. Every page we turned felt like stitching something back together. Naomi explained the next steps in a measured tone. "We'll file for elder protection under Georgia's vulnerable adult statute. I've worked with the investigator and he's taking this seriously. You've got documentation, timelines, patterns of coercion. It's more than enough." I looked down at the paperwork, then up at Naomi. She really tried to erase me, didn't she? She didn't flinch. She did. And she almost succeeded. We sat there in silence for a moment. Not the heavy kind, the steady kind. Like two people laying bricks for a bridge. They knew they'd need to cross again someday. That night, I opened the top drawer of the little pine dresser in my room and pulled out an old notebook I hadn't touched in years. Inside were torn bits of paper, grocery lists from the past, a few old recipes I'd scribbled next to magazine clippings, and on the back page, I started writing. This is what I remember. I remember every fever I stayed up through, every time I said yes when I wanted to say no, every time I put her dreams before my sleep, my money, my health. And I remember the silence, the long years when love was expected but never returned. I remember how it felt the day I realized I didn't need to wait for her to remember who I was. I closed the notebook and slid it under my pillow. The next morning, I sat with Naomi again and signed the final transfer documents. "It's done," she said. "She can't access anything without a court battle. And even then, the evidence is stacked against her." Something settled in me after that. Not revenge, not victory. Something quieter, like finding your name again after years of being called just Mom. Later that week, a delivery arrived at the front desk. Another envelope. No return address, but the same handwriting. I opened it slowly. Inside was a check for $3,000 and a note. "I know I messed up. I didn't mean to hurt you. I was scared. Please don't ruin my life. Just help me one last time, and I swear I'll leave you alone." My hands didn't shake. My heart didn't race. I folded the check in half, then again. Then again, until it was no bigger than a coin. I placed it in the shredder by the front office door and walked away without looking back. It wasn't about the money. It was never about the money. It was about the way she looked at me, like I was a fading resource, not a person. The next evening, I sat out on the courtyard bench. Margaret joined me with a crossword puzzle and a mug of warm cider. "Long day?" she asked. I shrugged. "Just a clear one." She nodded. "Sometimes that's worse." I smiled faintly. "Sometimes it's better." She didn't press, just passed me a pencil and pointed to a clue. 10 across, 5 letters means to reclaim quietly. I blinked, then smiled. Grace. We didn't say anything else for a while, just sat with the falling light and the hum of bugs in the bushes. That night, I stood in front of the mirror in my tiny bathroom, toothbrush in hand, and really looked at myself. The lines around my eyes, the silver in my hair, the woman looking back at me was tired, but she was still here, still whole. And for the first time in a long time, I whispered something I hadn't said out loud since Jasmine left for college. I don't owe anyone an explanation for being alive. Because I don't. I don't need to prove I remember enough. I don't need to justify my space. I don't need to apologize for protecting what's mine. And I definitely don't need her permission to feel free. I didn't expect to like the little garden at Cedar Pines. At first glance, it looked like an afterthought. 3 wooden benches, a bird bath, and a couple of mismatched flower pots. But the thing about quiet places is they give you time. Time to breathe, time to notice. Time to figure out who you are when no one's calling you mom anymore. Every morning after breakfast, I'd sit by the marigolds with my tea and my notebook. I didn't write anything profound. Just small things, the way the sun hit the bricks at 9:14, the way the nurse's aide hummed when she refilled the water jugs. Some days I drew boxes and crossed them off just for the satisfaction of seeing a day fully lived. There were no more voicemails, no emails. Naomi had cut the last digital thread Jasmine could pull on. It was strange at first, like waiting for a ghost to knock on the door. But silence eventually becomes its own kind of music. I learned the rhythm of my new life. I knew which evenings Margaret played piano in the common room and which days Mr. Donovan fell asleep in the library chair with the newspaper still open in his lap. I helped the cook rearrange the spice rack in the kitchen one rainy Thursday, and she taught me a trick for fluffier biscuits. It was small. It was unremarkable. It was mine. One afternoon, I took the bus into town by myself for the first time. I used to drive everywhere, but there was something healing in letting someone else take the wheel while I just looked out the window. I walked slowly through the bookstore, ran my fingers along spines I used to read to Jasmine when she was small. I bought myself a new journal with a red leather cover and a fountain pen I didn't need but wanted. That felt like a win. At the cafe across the street, I sat by the window and ordered chamomile tea with honey. The girl at the counter smiled and called me ma'am. Not sweetie, not hun, just ma'am. Respectful, neutral, exactly right. There's something no one tells you about starting over at 69. You don't need noise, you don't need applause, you just need enough quiet to hear your own thoughts again. I went to the community watercolor class the next week. I hadn't picked up a brush since high school. My hands shook a little, but the instructor, a man barely out of college, looked at my crooked flower and said, "That's got movement." I laughed. "It's arthritis." He laughed too. Still counts. I came back the next week, and the one after that. By the 4th session, I didn't sit near the door anymore. Naomi called to check in once a week. Her voice was always brisk, efficient, but I could hear the warmth beneath it. "You're doing okay?" she'd ask. "I'm doing quiet," I'd say. "And that's better than okay." She never pushed for more. One evening, Margaret knocked on my door with a tin of lemon cookies. "You don't have to come," she said, "but we're doing karaoke in the rec room." I almost said no. Then I didn't. I didn't sing. But I sat in the back, swaying gently while someone sang "Stand By Me" in a shaky alto. I cried a little, not because it was sad, but because it was the first time I let music move through me without trying to be strong for anyone else. That night, in my little twin bed with the creaky frame, I held my red journal and wrote, "Today, I was just Helen, not Jasmine's mother, not a burden, not a retirement plan, just me. And for once, that was enough." I started making lists of things I wanted to do before I turned 70. Not bucket list stuff, no skydiving or cruises, just small rebellions, go to a movie alone and eat the whole popcorn. Try yoga even if I look ridiculous. Say no without guilt. Say yes without needing someone's approval. The rebirth wasn't loud. It didn't come with fire or speeches. It came with mornings where I didn't flinch when the phone rang. Afternoons where I wandered a store just because. Evenings where I turned off the lights and didn't feel afraid of the dark. And every day, I got a little stronger. Not in the way people talk about strength, in gym slogans or Instagram quotes. No, this was a different kind of strength. The kind that grows in the quiet. The kind that no one claps for. The kind that says, You survived what was meant to break you, and you don't need anyone to see it but yourself. One morning, as I was trimming the dead leaves off a geranium in the courtyard, a woman from the newer wing came up beside me. She was maybe in her late 50s, eyes tired, voice soft. "You Helen?" I nodded. She looked down, fiddling with the strap of her bag. "Heard you got out." "Out of what?" She looked at me, really looked. "Out of her grip." I smiled slowly. "Yeah, I did." She nodded. "Good, I'm working on it." I didn't give advice. I didn't tell her what to do. I just handed her the little pruning shears and said, "Dead things grow mold if you don't clear them out. Start there." She took them like they weighed more than they did, and I realized something then. This quiet life, it wasn't just a retreat, it was a resistance, not against my daughter, not even against the past, but against the part of me that ever thought I needed to be useful, to be loved. It was mid-April when the letter came, a soft yellow envelope forwarded from my old address, with my name written in Jasmine's looping script. It had been months since I heard from her, long enough that the silence had stopped ringing. I turned it over in my hands a few times, then opened it without ceremony. I came by the house. It was empty. I didn't know where you'd gone until one of the neighbors told me. I thought you were being dramatic, but now I'm not so sure. I didn't expect the locks to be changed, or the deed to be out of my reach. I didn't know you had it in you. That line made me smile, not with pride, but with peace. I guess I thought you'd always be there, like the couch or the fridge or that hummingbird feeder you kept refilling even when no birds came. I didn't understand how much I was taking until there was nothing left to take. I folded the letter and slid it into my drawer. I didn't need an apology. I didn't need to reply. Her realization wasn't mine to manage. Days passed. The garden bloomed in unexpected places. Lavender near the mailbox, daffodils by the edge of the patio. Margaret called it accidental beauty. I called it proof that things grow when you stop digging them up. One Saturday morning, I sat under the pergola sipping my coffee when a young woman walked into the courtyard. She was maybe 30, a little lost-looking, holding a clipboard and a paper cup of coffee. She glanced around, then approached slowly. "Excuse me, ma'am. Are you Helen?" "I am." She smiled politely. "I'm from a nonprofit that works with adult children caring for aging parents. Your name came up through a referral. Your daughter." I raised an eyebrow but didn't flinch. "She said you had experience with boundaries," the woman added. I almost laughed. "She asked us to reach out?" The young woman nodded. "She's been attending one of our accountability groups. She said she's trying to understand, said she's not ready to contact you yet, but hopes maybe you'll read something she wrote." She handed me a printed page and left me sitting there with the wind curling around my ankles. I didn't read it right away. I watched a bee disappear into a tulip. I finished my coffee. I thought about all the years I would have run to that note like it was oxygen, but now I had breath of my own. When I finally read it, it was messy, raw, the kind of letter that doesn't ask to be forgiven but simply known. And that was enough. Later that evening, Margaret asked if I wanted to join her and Mr. Donovan for peach pie. I did. I brought whipped cream. We sat in the dining hall, swapping stories about our worst first jobs and most ridiculous relatives. The kind of conversation that makes you feel like your life still has pages to turn. As I walked back to my room under the soft hallway lights, I felt something I hadn't in a long, long time. Settled. Not because Jasmine came back, not because she changed, but because I had. She would carry her own lessons now. That was her road. I had mine, and I was walking it steady, free, and whole. Now, if you're still listening, let me ask you something. Have you ever felt like someone tried to write you out of your own life? Like you were only valuable when you were useful, but invisible when you needed something back? Tell me below, not for pity, but because sometimes saying it out loud is how we take the first step toward being seen again. Your story matters too.